Welcome to the Faces podcast. We're a Christian and Muslim charity working to build resilience in faith communities against child sexual exploitation and other forms of harm. We'll be talking about what faith and interfaith work means to us and how we embed an inclusive and authentic approach throughout our work. I'm Melissa, the development manager at Faces, and will be joined by some of our steering group for this discussion during Interfaith Week.
I'm Peter Adams. I work at St Mary's Church in the town centre of Luton and am the director of the St Mary's Centre for Peace and Reconciliation. I've been involved in interfaith work for the past 15 years and just love it.
I'm Tony Thompson. I lead one of the churches in Luton, Hope Church, and I've been involved in Faces since the beginning and really enjoyed becoming friends and meeting with different people from different backgrounds and learning from them, not just about CSE, but about faith generally.
Hi, I'm Rehana Faisal. I am co-chair of Faces alongside my friend and colleague, Tony Thompson. I sit on the steering group as chair of Lantern, which is a Muslim women's organisation, but I work closely alongside a number of organisations in Luton, including our councils of mosques.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ruth. I'm involved in Faces because I love the relationships and I love what we say by being together. And I love what we communicate in that we're all intolerant towards child sexual exploitation and how inherent it is to all of our faiths. And we have so much in common with each other. I'm currently CEO of Azalea and co-founder, which works with adults involved in commercial sexual exploitation.
Hi, my name is Sufian, Sadiq. I'm the chair of Discover Islam Luton. I've been a part of Faces since its inception. My focus is looking at it both from the Muslim community perspective, but more importantly, the educational perspective.
So we'll start just by talking about how we define faith-based working.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant question. And I define it as finding out the commonalities rather than the differences.
And I think from my perspective, I think faith-based working is just working. So, from my perspective as a Muslim, that thread of faith and direction and purpose and way of living weaves its way through every part of your life. So there's an element of my faith in everything that I do, and that it informs my decisions, it informs my intentions. It's there, if not overtly expressed, but it's always there, in everything that I do.
I would say there's a lot that has been said about things like authentic leadership, and for me, it's always been a real challenge. How can I truly be authentic and genuine if the most core aspect of me, my faith, is something that I have to kind of leave aside in certain forums? So for me, faith working is me being me being able to talk about something that's a significant part of me, and that moral compass that helps me guide me in my life can be a part of me in this working environment. So it's not anything alien to me. It's actually probably the most natural form of working for myself.
I think the fascinating thing and the encouraging thing is Rehana and Sufian have said as Muslims the very same thing that I would say as a Christian, and that faith-based working for me is exactly the same. Even though we are from different faiths, actually faith-based working is allowing our core beliefs to come to the fore. But doing it together as Muslims and Christians also gives that opportunity to learn from each other, but also requires us to honour and respect each other. And one of the special things that has come out of our friendship and relationship is that honouring, that mutual respect and learning from each other.
Yeah, I'd really just endorse all of that because, I think Sufian's word authentic there is so important. I've been working with various of you for last 10 years or so, and actually it's the authenticity, it's expressing the very best of my faith, being able to be who I am. And this particular group of people, having been involved in faith work for much longer, it's with this particular group of people that actually I think we've gone so much further because we've been dealing with really hard issues, but actually we've done so from the very best of our faith and with a real reality. And that's I think that's the heart of faith for me. It's about not playing games. It's about being real.
Yeah, I definitely think that faith-based working allows people of faith to be fully themselves in the space that they're working. And as much as Ruth picked up on kind of the similarities that we might have, but actually I think I value the differences more. I like being able to engage in discussions around what makes our belief different and still being able to connect and do the work together despite those differences. And I suppose that leads us on to the next question of how does working in collaboration with another faith benefit the outcomes of our work?
One of the experiences, particularly in the non-faith space, is that I think many of us will have always also experienced is that seen as part of the problem in discussion. So it's an irrelevant inclusion in a discussion, which takes away from all of the things that we've heard already about, actually that's us as our authentic selves. It's the thing that defines us. It's the thing that shapes our ideas and our thoughts and our morals and our sense of purpose. I think the important thing about working, as Sufian said, with other people of faith is that we can be true to all of those principles. But Melissa, I'd also like to pick up on the comment that you just made there. I think one of the concerns or worries that people have about interfaith working is that does this mean that we have to dilute the expression of our own faith? And I would say, and I hope that we kind of exemplify that in Faces, it's absolutely not. That here, certainly within our context, we value that difference, and we constantly remind ourselves that yes, there are similarities, but there are also irreconcilable differences between your faith, my faith, and Sufian's faith. So as Muslims, our faith, and Peter and Tony and Ruth, there are irreconcilable differences. There are things that we will never ever agree on, but that's okay. We can still work together. We can still love and respect each other. We can still support each other, but we recognise, acknowledge, and know that those differences are there.
I agree with Rehana, but one of the things that we disagree on, I'm much more open for us to be persuading each other to change our faith, where she's much more pessimistic on it than I am. But I'm still open to us being able to grapple through and with our differences come to understand the truth, which is clearly my truth.
Tony, as a brown woman of a certain age, a brown Muslim woman of a certain age, with a certain history, we have experienced the phenomena of Christian attempts to convert, and it's failed thus far. But you keep punching, Tony.
Thank you, Rehana.
Something I would love to add: working with people of faith, or being in relationship, being in friendship with people of faith, is such a privilege because we're driven. We're purposeful people, and our moral compass is imperative to what we do, and our values drive forward excellence, and that is really refreshing. I'm on so many boards and so many consortiums of individuals, but I love being with people of faith because there's a lot more clarification and a lot more authenticity in the way that we weave conversations and drive forward best practice, drive forward policies. And that's really refreshing to have that. And there is so much that we've got in common with each other. We really hate commercial sexual exploitation. We really hate child sexual abuse. And we really hate the way our faiths are being blamed for things. And we want to say that the problems are not around Christianity. The problems are not around Islam. The problems are around human nature that just have respectable guises, and it's lovely to be able to come together and to do that because we're all equal in this, and I find it really refreshing being together with my friends here because we're driven by our moral compass, not by policies or what's happening in the sort of secular world, and that's really refreshing for me.
I think what Ruth said that's so important, and really right from the beginning of Faces, one of the things that we were aware of is that our faiths were being weaponized. They were being used to turn us against each other in the area of sexual exploitation. And so actually to work through this together and stand together and become friends in the middle of talking about this and addressing the issues far wider than that difference were so important.
I think one of the things that really stands out to me is that in the kind of socio-political landscape that we find ourselves in Britain today, Islam is often the elephant in the room. And when you're working and collaborating on faiths, it's no longer that elephant in the room. It's with a lot of these issues, Islam is often referenced but not referenced. Clearly, inferences are made to people's faith and their background, and it's not spoken of. And I think this idea that actually, for me, the whole concept, I'm not a big fan of it, of British values, but actually seeing people for what they are, working with other people for who they are, and then coming together to co-construct something. And very important, not to dilute in any way, a comment that really stood out for me was once Tony and I were on a run together, and Tony said that it's amazing how we both get on with one another, but we wholly disagree that we both fully appreciate the other is totally wrong in their belief in life. And I think the fact that we could actually agree and say that very openly, it was really important, because the foundations of that relationship are that, for me, my faith is ultimately, for me, the right way of life, and it is for Tony. But we can yet co-construct something and develop something that for the benefit of wider society without compromising our faith or our values.
I just wanted to comment as well on something that Ruth said about us being equal. And I think that in the Faces space, and when we have meetings and when we come together, I think we do have that, being on a level playing field in how we can engage with each other. But also what's really crucial in how we work and how we develop our training and understand the issues that we're addressing is that actually we're not equal when it comes to how we look at social perceptions and the structures that we have to navigate in order to do this work. And I think it's because we can have that real honest conversation and listen to each other at our level that we're able to really sort of practice an awareness of that and embed that in how we deliver our work.
I was just going to add to what Sufian was saying. I remember that run very well. And the other aspect of it was really fascinating. We both talked about how our faith became more real to us. And for me, I come from a nominal Christian background. Really, I wasn't a believer. But both of us had those experiences where our faith suddenly became real for us, and it became really part of our embedded life. And it was so powerful to hear his story of that, which was mirrored to my story. And it then added to that sense of respect and honouring. We could conclude that we were wrong, but the power of hearing the journey and knowing the commonality between us, I think, was special. And so it was a very good run, wasn't it, Sufian?
I remember I won. It was definitely
that would have been one of the few then.
Melissa, if I could just pick up on the point you were making about equality, because I think that's actually a really important aspect of the way that we have worked, is recognising the structural inequalities between our positions and making way for it. So, as much as with Sufian and I, you might have, well, more Sufian than me, but big characters, it would be dishonest to suggest that, despite, the big personality, he's an accomplished professional, but actually, when he's in a room with Peter, for example, sometimes the things that he will say, often the things that he will say will not be received, appreciated, valued in the same way as somebody like Peter, as a white male, of a certain background. And I think it's been an important part of our working that we recognise the power and privilege within the group and make adjustments to make sure that we navigate that. So we create a sense of equity amongst us, and that's involved some probably difficult conversations, difficult for us to have as the brown Muslims in the room, but also for our white Christian friends. But I think we've come through those, all of us, as better people, and I'm sure Tony can talk later about how that's impacted on his work and his engagement in the church, but it has grown and developed and helped all of us in lots of different ways.
I think we're all big personalities, every one of us in many different ways. And yet actually what I love about it is the fact that one of the things we do when we're together, there is a recognition of actually humility in which we stand, and actually I love that in each of you, and I think it's been one of the things that actually makes our time special, because we actually do honour and appreciate one another, and somehow or other that makes us more than rather than less than.
I was saying, in terms of thinking about that positive aspect of working with other faiths and some of the things that Rehana just said, that recently I came across the term, and it's probably only in the last year or so, probably more so actually since Black Lives Matter movement after the death of George Floyd, that the term allyship, and I never really obviously heard the term, but never truly reflected or understood. And for me, the allyship was that I started in the community field, probably at a more prominent level, but probably at age 22, 23, when I first had my interactions with Peter. And I still look incredibly young, and I'm blessed for that. And being 36 now, one of the things that I appreciated at that time was that allyship from somebody from another faith that can say in a room that there's a point Sufian is making and we need to hear that point. And it's a very simple sentence to follow up after I spoke, but it was something that made my voice heard. It allowed me to be heard in various forums. We sat on forums together at the police, at the council, and I know that allyship from a white male, a Christian, of his standing, of his position, made a huge impact at that time in the way we managed race relations in Luton, at perhaps the lowest point of race relations in Luton that we can remember in the last 20 odd years. But that was through allyship. That was through a positive working relationship where actually I took positivity from that other person and their faith, because they recognized that they had a position that could help me get my voice across to those that perhaps will not otherwise hear it.
Thank you,
Sufian.
That was a really powerful point. And I guess we've come up with a couple of really important things to consider when doing interfaith work, which, like we've said, is acknowledging that there will be power differences at play, and being able to kind of accommodate for that and acknowledge that and do things like make sure other people in the room are being heard. And also, as Tony and Sufian both said, kind of accepting that believe differently, and I think that your belief is wrong and that mine is right, but still being able to be friends through that. Are there any other sort of key messages you'd give to people about interfaith working and doing it well? It's
Rehana's point, I think. For me, it's a challenge where I don't actually like the word interfaith, because for me, the word interfaith over the years has got connotations with dilution. I've got to compromise my faith. For us to work together, we've got to join a common ground, and that common ground will mean that elements of my faith have to be pulled away. I've got to put aside or compromise for us to be able to work together. We won't be able to work together unless I make those compromises or those sacrifices. And for me, I think the reason this forum works together, and the reason actually interfaith in its truest form could work really effectively, is when people fully accept that they accept somebody else's faith as being different, and they understand that there will be major differences and nuanced differences between one another, but respect that. And for me, it's being able to say, this is Islam, and not being apologetic for it, not being apologetic for my position in certain organizations. We know that Discover Islam exists, and we know Discover Islam exists to provide information about Islam. But Discover Islam in its early years received huge help from Peter Adams, who was leading the churches in Luton. And that it was power. Discover Islam at no stage compromised saying what they are, but stood in the opening of Discover Islam as there was protests outside from the far right. Inside, stood alongside me, was Peter Adams. And that, I think, is the fact that for me at that point, it was crucial that we would not compromise. We would say Islam for what it is, and that's what we want people to know. We wanted people to walk away with not a distorted image of Islam that was being portrayed in the media, but the true image, and the true image was not to be compromised. And to have somebody stand there to say, actually, we want to support you in your platform to be able to speak the truth without having to compromise, without having to feel like you can't say what Islam is. There was power in that working together.
I think one of the things to recognise is that we are not always understood by our communities. And I know that not everyone within my community understands what I'm doing and values that. And I know it's similarly within the Muslim community. And hence the things that Sufian said is really important. But anyone involved in this needs to recognise that it's not always going to be accepted. And we here all believe that part of our faith is to have dialogue and to have relationships and friendship and to learn from that. And part of my role is trying to help others from within my community to accept and learn and honour and respect Muslim friends. And so some of the powerful things out of this friendship has been where different people here have been and communicated with my church. And so unusually, but both Sufian and Rehana have spoken at Hope Church. They have been very respectful in what they've said and have been powerful in helping to communicate what does it mean to be a Muslim in Luton today. And having this friendship enables that, but not everyone can do that. And again, just being straightforward, I know many church leaders have heard of that happening and been sort of thinking, well, that would be great, but I could never do that in my church. And I've had the privilege of being able to speak in different mosques as well. I've tried to do it respectfully, and it's a great honour. But I realise there's a cost involved in this, and not everyone understands it. But the benefits far outweigh the costs. And I think it needs to be done in the right way. And as everyone has said, it's done in a respectful way, an honouring way, but not compromising what we believe, but what we believe is honouring and respecting each other.
We are very honoured to be involved in Faces and to stand together. And the directive should be that we all feel we have an equal voice, and the directive should be that we're able to, and we should get angry when we know that we don't have an equal voice, and we need to work hard constantly against that. And I think if people want to be involved in interfaith work, they need to have a huge, massive dollop of emotional resilience to be able to sustain that and to drive forward their moral compass of valuing and appreciating and not feeling that they are judge and jury of other people. And something I find very important is that in life often people have a need to be right rather than to fight for the oppressed within social injustice. And our passion has to go towards what it is that's wrong, what it is that's broken in society. And for us, it's child sexual exploitation.
Yeah, and I think we also, in doing that, we understand all of the different things that will apply when addressing child sexual exploitation, which is why our training around sort of prejudice and inclusion is really relevant, because depending on where you are in the world and what you look like and your, like you said, your background, or that's all going to impact your experiences of exploitation and the responses you'll receive from services. So incorporating and understanding of all of that is also really kind of an essential part of it.
Well, I was just going to actually tell a little story about my visit to Tony's church. I hadn't gone to speak. I had gone, I don't even remember why I was there, but it was a Sunday morning. I was there, tail end of worship, and Tony decides to ask me to come and speak. So it's 10 o'clock. on a Sunday morning, and without any thought, I agree, and to be honest, I did sort of 2 minutes on loving Jesus, because I thought, this is safe ground, isn't it? You love Jesus, I love Jesus. It's Sunday morning, it's 10 o'clock. And then Tony leans over and he sort of says, that's all very well, Rehana, but can we talk about racism and white privilege, please? And I said, well, it's still 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, Tony, but we'll give it a go. And I felt at the time I did this sort of 5-minute kind of round trip for going from kind of colonialism to present day manifestations in Luton. It felt like I was punching the congregation in the face because of the intensity of it. But this obviously says something about Tony, but it also says something about that congregation there. Some people were visibly uncomfortable, but there were a number of people who came to speak to me, and I know subsequently came to speak to Tony to say, thank you for saying that. Thank you for articulating that. And it really opened up a space in the church, in Tony's church, to have that dialogue with his own community, with his own congregants, and how to make and I suppose supporting his church in recognizing those different experiences, because some of my experiences as a Muslim, as a brown woman, and as a brown woman, will be shared by Tony's very diverse congregation. So, what we do in here, and that the work, the learning, the conversations, the making space for one another in different contexts, doesn't just help us kind of navigate this difficult area of child sexual exploitation, recognizing the barriers to, disclosure, for example, for different groups, the support that we provide. It doesn't just impact, on that and informing that work. It actually bleeds into all of these other areas of work that we are involved in, and enriches a lot of that so much more.
I agree. I think that as well as when we're doing interfaith work, it shines lights to all of the kind of the inequalities we've just spoken about, the different parts of people's identity and how they'll interact with services when we're talking about safeguarding, but also with all other kinds of work. If we're not embedding an approach that takes account for faith and all other kinds of difference, then it's not really inclusive of those people. So I think there's a lot to be learned from interfaith working that's done well in lots of other spaces as well, in terms of taking account for difference and being really inclusive of lots of different people.
As I've been reflecting on the different things being said, one of the things about interfaith work is that we often think it's about belief and it's about all those things, but actually for me so much of this comes back to basic character traits of kindness, compassion, gentleness, humility, etc. And actually that's what I suppose in some ways one of the things about child sexual exploitation, it calls upon all of those things in us. So actually we're here because of that our faith has sensitized us to this horrible suffering of young people and children, and those who are survivors of that going on into adulthood. But actually that sensitivity and compassion to those who are vulnerable and have been caught up in this is driven by aspects of our faith that call that out in us. And I think somehow or other that has added to the quality of what we are and who we are when we come together. I just taking this into a totally different area. When my parents were ill and then died 3 years ago, I would say the greatest support I had during that period of time was from Muslim friends. And I mean, I had all the right words from Christians and they were special as well. But actually, it was those moments when people would write to me and say anything you want. There was a reality in that drew upon all that we draw upon when we're seeking to talk about this suffering of young people in our world. And so, I mean, coming back to, interfaith work at its best draws out the very best of what faith does for a person. It's my faith and the things I believe that actually call me to be a good person, a kind person. And actually at that point, I work out of that. I don't have to be talking about yes, I mean, it's wonderful when Rehana wants to talk about Jesus. I love to talk about Muhammad. I love to talk about aspects of that. But actually, what for me is most important is when I'm just living out the reality of my faith. And I think that's what makes the interfaith space so important and so powerful when we do it well. And I think Faces has done it incredibly well.
Thank you so much, Peter. And thank you everyone for everything you've shared today. I think if we just close on maybe, and I know you've already said kind of some of the really positive things that you get from interfaith working, but maybe if we all shared one thing that we really sort of value in doing this work, and that perhaps we would hope other people would find that value as well. I think for me, working in churches as a Muslim, I think it's really the friendship that I find among Christians, and because they are people of faith, that there's a connection and a level of friendship that I have that I don't have with people who I may have known much longer, but who aren't of any particular faith. And I think there's just a different kind of connection that we can have between each other, even if our beliefs may be very different in some ways.
For me, it goes back to the point of authenticity, when you can work with people and you are yourself, therefore they're getting the most genuine part of you. And for me, that's probably the most important and crucial aspect, that you can truly appreciate and achieve cohesion. That word's been thrown around, bandied around so much, and there's so many challenges around it. But what true cohesion is when people can be who they are, not compromise their values and their belief systems, and then work with others with different values and different belief systems, and not feel like there's an issue in achieving shared goals. And that for me is cohesion, and that for me is what can be achieved through forums like this, where people come together of different faiths with a shared mission and a shared goal.
Very simply, great food and great friendship.
I agree with others. It's the friendship that's there, but it's friendships where you learn. And so I have learned and grown so much by having deep friendships with people from different cultures, different backgrounds, that can enrich myself as an individual. So I have thoroughly enjoyed and learned a lot from the experience.
I think all of the things that friends and colleagues here have said, but we've mentioned within the last hour, half an hour, or touched upon some of the really difficult conversations that we've had as a group, and we've been working together in this area for 3 or 4 years now. And I think one of the things that I personally really, really value is the ability to say something and talk about things unfiltered, and not having to care. And this sounds awful, but it's a really good thing, but not having to care about feelings. So, often when we talk about racism or prejudice or Islamophobia, we often do it in carefully guarded words to make sure that the feelings of people who perhaps perpetuate some of those ideologies, those feelings are not hurt. And that when we talk about racism or whiteness, that are we going to hurt the feelings of the white people in the room? But I can confidently have those conversations amongst these friends and not have to navigate or tiptoe around things, because offence will be taken. And that's a truly liberating thing.
I think for me, Faces means home. It's a place where I feel at home. It's a place where I can bring myself that feels hurt because faiths are misunderstood. It's a place where I can bring home the injustices of child sexual exploitation and know that it's a safe place to talk about these things and to action changes in society. And it's a wonderful privilege to be able to have a home for those pains that we carry. And as a social activist, it's an absolute privilege to be in that healing space, because often there's so much misunderstanding about faith around child sexual exploitation.
Thanks for listening to the Faces podcast. You can find out more about us and the services we provide on our website at faces.org.uk.